Next speaker and Peter Zhang, in the United States, and then he's gonna talk about the eco-civilization and time consciousness, and then programmatic thinking. Yeah, over to you, Peter.
My title is Ecological Civilization, Time Consciousness, and Programmatic Thinking. I don't have a paper, so I'll just go through the slides. We'll try to finish everyone. So the prompt I got from Alex was climate change and civilization transition. So the slides that follow are the outcome of my brainstorming. So it's pretty scattered. Hopefully there's some kind of coherence. I guess first I want to say our civilization needs to transition to an ecological track. We need such a track switch. Our civilization is largely based on literacy, like writing, reading, the phonetic alphabet, especially according to thinkers like Levi-Strauss, the French anthropologist, Marshall McLuhan, who wrote about the alphabet effect. And even Michel de Certeau spoke of modernity and modernization as writing. Writing, according to McLuhan, had a civilizing function. So my large point is that our civilization is predicated upon literacy, basically. But there are nuances, according to Marshall McLuhan, differences between phonetic literacy and other alternative kinds of literacies. So, but I'll skip that part. To risk sounding like a technological determinist, I guess I want to say literacy brings with it a number of things. According to a Song Dynasty Chinese poet, Su Shi, literacy brings worries, creates worries. According to Flusser, the Czech-born media philosopher, literacy brings about historical consciousness and the root metaphor of time as a straight line, a linear time. And Marshall McLuhan would say Euclidean space, this kind of abstract geometric space, which really does not exist in real life. To go with linearity, progressive ideology. The whole idea of progress is actually an ideology that came with writing, especially alphabetic writing, and also causal thinking, which pushed to an extreme becomes determinism, cause effect. This kind of there's this whole notion of the causal chain, and also the mental habit of one thing at a time, one at a timeness instead of simultaneity or all at once. And Taoxia talked about Gestalt psychology. I guess with literacy also comes a kind of figure orientation, figure minus the ground, figure without a ground. And correspondingly, if, metaphorically speaking, the mind has two sorts of vision, central vision and peripheral vision, then with literacy, the peripheral vision of the mind also atrophies, but peripheral vision of the mind is quite crucial for ecological thinking, holistic, relational thinking. Another thing that came with literacy was what Max Weber calls the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism, which is all about efficiency, time as a straight line, frugality, productivity, and all that. Joff talks about the achievement society. I guess the media ecological root of that sensibility is actually literacy. So, which is the foundation of civilization as we know it today, even though we are behind. We're in the post-literate age today. So in the coming slides, I'll talk about ecological civilization, old and new. Okay. So this British writer, John Mitchell, wrote a wonderful essay called The Ideal Worldview, which appeared in, I guess, 1982-83, in which he talks about an alternative cosmology, which is not based on the Big Bang, which is about expansion and progression. Rather, there was an appreciation for or an understanding of the cosmos as relatively stable. So people were not driven by this impulse to pursue progress and I guess quantity, etc. So humanity lived in peace with nature, with the natural environment. So correspondingly, in ancient times, there were sciences and technologies, but they, I guess, belonged to a different kind of worldview, a different kind of paradigm. And there was, I guess, Levi-Strauss talks about the difference between the civilized mind and primitive thinking. But he uses the word primitive without any negative connotations. It's purely a purely technical term. Civilized means having a writing system. Primitive simply means pre-literacy, the pre-literate mode of thinking, which is more holistic. I guess this way of thinking can be seen in traditional East Asian medicine. In China, there's an ancient irrigation system called the Dujiangyan. I think after 2,000 years, it's still functional. There's no need to do dredging. So it feels like all natural forces are taken into consideration, including the speed of the water flow and how much sedimentation there can be, etc., the shape of the terrain and all that. So I guess this kind of self-sufficiency is based upon holistic thinking, which takes into consideration all factors, all forces. So in the John Mitchell piece he alluded to Plato's notion of the world as a living creature. It's breathing in and breathing out. So rather than as a dead body, according to modern, I guess, modern physics, etc. In the ancient Chinese Taoist Zhuangzi's thought, there is a kind of contempt for the machine like a heart or mind, heart-mind. So I guess these are things, these ideas were the philosophical or I guess ideological foundation for a kind of ecological civilization in ancient times, during which humanity was able to reproduce and survive without doing too much damage to the natural environment. More along the same lines, notions like oneness between humanity and nature, attunement even, there's Feng Shui or geomancy was actually presented as a kind of ancient science. It's not superstition, rather it's a kind of ancient science which cares about the channels of energy of the earth and how to build monuments, temples, towers, pavilions, etc., to further enhance the flow of energy to benefit human communities and make the land more fertile and the people more fertile. So it's all about building structures in accordance with the energy flow of the local natural environment. So yeah, I guess that idea has a lot to do with attunement. Similarly, in ancient China, for example, there's a kind of simple natural philosophy which uses notions like yin and yang and the 5-element theory to basically take account of everything, to handle everything, including medicine, I guess urban planning, and basically everything. So overall, there's a kind of relational rather than a narrowly ontological orientation. You know, in Buddhism, there's this whole idea of Indra's net. Basically, the idea is about, I guess, diamonds or pearls or gems reflecting each other. So the information contained in one pearl actually contains information about the totality. So there's, I guess, in modern times, we talk about holographic thinking. And the blockchain is just the latest manifestation of the same kind of image, I guess. So in Buddhism, Buddhists, talk about interbeing and interpenetration, mutual dependence, even counterdependence, etc. In, I guess, the relational orientation can also be found in the Book of Changes, which is all about the relations among the main forces in any given situation. My work has been about interology, and Taoxia actually contributed to this line of inquiry, and Geoff and Alex also have participated in symposiums about interology. It's a coined word based upon the prefix inter or betweenness. So I guess these things go together. They point in the direction of ecological civilization, a different paradigm, basically. To move on to time consciousness, overall, I think to have a robust ecological civilization, maybe we need to get out of linear time and reconsider alternative notions of time, including kairos and cyclical time, etc. Regarding kairos, the opportune moment, when we get acupuncture treatment, I guess if you really understand this tradition, I guess when to treat what disease, I guess there's an optimal season to treat a particular kind of bodily conditions. So I guess you wait for the right time, the right timing to do, I guess, therapeutic interventions. Agriculture, very simple. You sow the seeds in springtime. When the opportune moment is past, we lose time for plants to grow. We might have a bad harvest. Or even a sexual life has a lot to do with kairos. This is more like a kind of universal understanding. I guess both Christians and the Taoists know about this. The best time to make a baby is midnight, like 12 a.m. Midnight, basically. Actually, Michel Foucault talks about this in one of his little pieces. The Book of Changes, the Chinese ancient classic, is all about acting or not acting, depending on whether it's time to act. It's all about prudence. Act. There's this notion of action, of non-action. When the relational configuration is not opportune, is not auspicious, try not to do anything. Wait for the right time. So kairos, the opportune moment. Cyclical time, there's a different sequence of the 64 hexagrams based on, depending on which version we're using. The Feng Shui arrangement has a kind of a perfect correspondence with, the 4 seasons of the year. The winter solstice, summer solstice, the spring and the fall equinoxes, etc. They corresponded to the particular hexagrams. So to live under the guidance of that sequence means to live, I guess, in tune with the energy levels of the season. So we will enjoy health and longevity rather than ruin our, bodily and psychic energy for nothing. So cyclical time is a kind of time consciousness in prehistory, which literally technically means before the invention of writing. So notions like the eternal return of the same, which can be found in Nietzsche, also talked about a lot in, I guess, by Deleuze and Flusser, etc. Of course, Deleuze has a very different interpretation of this notion, but I guess literally this notion implies this understanding of time as a circle rather than a straight line. So under this kind of time consciousness, humanity lived in a kind of festive mode. There are festivals, throughout the year. Somebody said, actually, we need 360 festivals throughout the year, which really implies we should live a festive mode of life. Also, there's leisure, which is also a kind of time outside of time, which has a lot to do with the Greek notion of school and the Latin notion of otium. Geoff mentioned that in his presentation, basically leisure. The Greek academy is a kind of space outside of space, a kind of sacred space which affords the contemplative life. And I guess the Jewish Sabbath would be a kind of time outside of time or sacred time dedicated to the religious life, the religious life basically. So if we live according to these notions, these understandings of time will become what Flusser calls homo ludens, and we would value a kind of purposeless, pure, idle, playful, or ludic life. So this word idle also appeared in Geoff's presentation, but that points in a different direction. So I guess Plato said leisure is the goal of life, the seat of wisdom. I think Stigler talks about otium and negotium in one of his books as well. So I'm trying to say the notion of leisure is really significant for these thinkers and also for interology as well. Confucius, his entire project is really about making the secular sacred. So every minute becomes sacred time. So we do everyday little things, the daily routine. But Confucianism is really about transforming everyday triviality into a kind of ritual. So time in its entirety becomes sacred. So today we face the challenge of being engulfed by this black hole called cyber space time. So we really need to set aside time for rituals and get away from media, especially social media. So there have been notions like social media Sabbath, tech Sabbath, which are quite current these days. So back to this whole notion of ecology, according to Marshall McLuhan, ecological consciousness started with the launch of the Russian, US, the Soviet Union's man-made satellite called Sputnik. Before that moment, humanity more or less enjoyed a kind of blissful ignorance. So, we were not aware of ecology precisely because we had a kind of vital, robust ecosystem, basically. But this, I guess, downward spin really started with industrialization earlier than the launch of Sputnik. But I'm trying to say in ancient times, even though ecology was not a thing, not an academic discipline by any stretch, but ancient people were quite aware of symbiosis, like this kind of symbiotic relation between bees and flowers. Deleuze talks about that quite often, the bee and the, I guess, the snapdragon or something, So further about ecology, I guess, even Darwin himself was quite aware of cooperation, mutual help, and love, not just competition. So this overemphasis on natural selection and the survival of the fittest is really a very narrow understanding of Darwinism. I guess social Darwinism is just a kind of a bad version, a bad species of Darwinism. If we read Darwin again carefully, we will see he emphasizes symbiosis and mutual help as much as competition in the survival of the fittest. Actually, to be fit implies to have a robust relational mutual dependence with resources and other life forms around oneself. Besides a narrowly understood Darwinian notion of ecology, there's also, evolution, Darwinian evolution. We also need to entertain a Bergsonian understanding of evolution, which is really about differentiation. Elan vital as a development of differentiation, as a process of differentiation. That process is really the actualization of the virtual. So, dichotomy is the law of life. Elan vital, differentiates into divergent life forms. But these divergent life forms actually are mutually dependent. They're different not just from each other, but also for each other. That's Peter Hershock's notion, distinction. He's a Buddhist scholar based in Hawaii, very, very interesting scholar. Very ecological, in this understanding. Deleuze also talks about not just actualization, but also emphasizes quite a bit counter-actualization. There's an appreciation of the virtual, not just the actual, in Deleuze's philosophy. In Michel Serres, there's also a kind of emphasis upon de-differentiation, going backwards. It's like the human hand is not a tool, but it's the universal tool, which is totipotent. So I guess if evolution goes external, if we, let our technology evolve and maintain the totipotency of our organs and our body, then, I guess it feels like a kind of regression, but, in a different sense, humanity as a life form is very totipotent. It's like in a sense, almost the telos of evolution. I guess I don't want to make that claim, but I'm trying to suggest, to go to think with Michel Serres, this kind of loss of specialism or specialization is actually a kind of, paradoxically, a kind of progress or progression. But anyway, I guess totipotency implies, this hand is not a tool, but it's like an axe. There's a sense of anyness. There's maximum virtuality. That's something we want to retain, actually. And in Taoism, there's also this appreciation for de-differentiation. Can you be a baby? Can you live like a baby, which has maximum virtuality rather than maximum actuality? To actualize is to move forward, which is also a process of aging. We lose our potentials by actualizing ourselves this particular way, like becoming an engineer, which also implies loss of other sensibilities in a lot of ways. So Taoist internal alchemy emphasizes this reversal rather than moving forward. Notions like intermingling appears in two of the hexagrams. One stands for completion, the other stands for peace. Basically, intermingling of yin and yang, water and fire, means the coming together of the differentiated. It's a process of de-differentiation. If our world can go through this kind of reverse or de-differentiation, then the world will be young again. It's a process of rejuvenation, I would say, which applies to the human body, but also the territorial body or our world. Toshia talks about the four ecologies. So I guess other than the threefold ecology, Guattari talks about, lost my slide, environmental, social, and mental ecologies. There's also the ecology of media or technologies, and also Paul Virilio talks about gray ecology, which is the pollution of time and space and distance. Not just the pollution of matter, rather it's the pollution of distance, which creates a sense of claustrophobia, because to lose space and time means to lose our freedom. Peter Hershock also talks about the necessity for an ecology of ethical systems, not just white Euro-American value systems, but also value systems from the rest of the world, not just the West, but also the rest. I think today we should feel lucky that we still have, the third world from which we can revive, relearn these alternative ways of living, styles of life. I do want to emphasize that media ecology bears upon all these other ecologies. The ecology of technologies we have today has impacts upon all other ecologies. Technology is not value neutral, rather it has its embedded value. So I guess our mental symbiosis with artificial intelligence today really points in the direction of acceleration, the kind of hyper creativity which will precipitate the end game scenario, which means maybe we're facing a planetary apocalypse of sorts with like global warming, etc., natural disasters, I'm really depressed this year by the war going on and how vicious the military-industrial complex is, and how nihilistic its mentality is. We're really ruled by big capital, including the oil industry, etc., etc. So without a massive, wholesale worldview shift, we can't imagine a kind of a civilizational transition. So that's why we're talking about a kind of worldview shift, a different cosmology, rather than more of the same. So more about time consciousness, I guess, in post-history, which started since the invention of photography, according to Flusser. Time is understood as a vortex which sucks in past and future alike. So there's a kind of fullness of time, a kind of eternal present. I guess Deleuze might use the word chronos to talk about this kind of time. So I guess in our age, in the digital age, the nanosecond has become a big deal, partly because it's beyond the human scale, which means there's a kind of profound rhythmic dissensus between us humans and IT, information technology, including computers. There's further acceleration down the road with the advent of 5G communication technology and also quantum computing. There will be further acceleration on the horizon. So another significant time-related notion is synchronization. For one thing, this is more like from Paul Virilio. Huge numbers of people's, I guess, emotions are actually synchronized, which is really, really dangerous, which means when we see a piece of news, the entire world can react to that piece of news simultaneously to lead to a kind of integral accident, including things like a stock market crash or a kind of generalized violence, military conflict, not just between two nations, but among all nations. So, but Virilio really did not have a good example when he came up with this notion, the integral accident. But I guess the pandemic might be a good example, but also a global-wide stock market crash, for example. Real time is another significant, and relevant understanding of time or species of time. Paul Virilio talks about our age as an age of instantaneity, immediacy, and ubiquity, right? This kind of speeding up, communication happening at the speed of light really stands for the aging, the getting old of the world. So we really need to take seriously this question: how can we rejuvenate the world? When communication happens too fast, right? There's really no time for reflection. Everybody's actually reflecting. So we're lose, I guess, deliberative democracy, rational decision-making and all that. So real time looks like a kind of luxury, but it's really also a huge threat to politics as we knew it once upon a time. So next I want to talk about if
you should have 2 minutes, so please.
Okay. Yeah, just cut me off anytime. I just, I prepared maybe a little bit too much. Threats to eco-civilization. I guess I want to mention possessive capitalism, power politics, and the media as well, which really collaborates. All of the media outlets collude to manipulate our understanding of current events, etc. And also we have a weak left and there's a kind of pervasive functionalism according to Flusser. So I guess with the last minute left, I want to say Western civilization from day one had a kind of meta program. Everything we see today is a kind of a random actualization of potentials or virtualities contained within that big program. So including the atomic bomb, global warming, mass unemployment, etc. So I guess progress understood according to programmatic thinking is really a kind of exhaustion of the virtualities within that big program, which leads us closer and closer to a kind of endgame scenario. So both Paul Virilio and Wilhelm Flusser give the ethical prescription of deceleration, slowing down. I coined the term retardationism rather than accelerationism. So I think if we want to have a kind of sustainable natural environment, we should say no to guys like Elon Musk and be responsible. We only have this one world, which is the Earth. There's no, migration to Mars. It's a stupid idea. So we need a kind of worldview shift in order to have a kind of civilization transition. So that's the thrust of this presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Yeah, actually, the very long span, but the conclusion, would give us some very precise idea, how to manage, what we experience in terms of a crisis.